The evening sun casts long shadows across my garden. I'm sitting in an old wicker chair that Thorne restored himself 15 years ago. In front of it was a small garden bed of roses, my small consolation. I flipped through the pages of the photo album, squinting my eyes against the setting sun. 67 years in this world, and what do I have? An empty house, a cold bed, and a photo album that has become my only companion. Thorne is looking at me from a photo from 1983. We had just moved to Salem. He is standing outside our first house, so proud and full of hope. He was thin, with a thick dark beard and those eyes that always looked as if they saw something more than others. We came here with nothing but an old Ford and a box of our belongings. Thorne got a job at a local carpentry shop, and I got a job as an accountant at Galway Construction, a small construction company where I worked for almost 40 years. Eudora, this is our new beginning, he said then, putting his arm around me. And it was indeed a new beginning. A year later, Lachlan was born. In the photo, he is so small, wrapped in a blue blanket that my mother knitted. Thorne is holding him awkwardly, but with such tenderness in his eyes that even now, after all these years, I feel something tighten in my chest. I turn the pages further. Here is Lachlan walking to first grade, with a huge backpack and a crooked smile. Here he is on a bike that Thorne put together from parts he bought at a yard sale. We were never rich, but Lachlan never wanted for anything. Thorne and I worked tirelessly to give him everything he needed. When Lachlan turned 18, he went to college in Portland to study engineering. Thorne and I were so proud, the first in our family to get a college degree. I remember Thorne crying at graduation, although he denied it later. I put the album on my lap and look at the hydrangea bush I planted last spring. The wind gently moves the leaves. Thorne passed away 5 years ago. A heart attack took him so quickly that I didn't even have time to say goodbye. I just woke up one morning next to the cold body of the man I had lived with for 42 years. Lachlan had come to the funeral. He was alone. He was not yet married to Ziona. He hugged me, cried with me, and promised me that he would come more often now, that he would not leave me alone. 3 months. That's how long his visits lasted. Then it was back to work. Then Ziona. A beautiful girl with cold eyes whom he met at some corporate party. 6 months later, they were already engaged. Mom, you'll love her like your own daughter, Lachlan assured me when he brought Ziona to meet him. But I didn't. I couldn't. There was something calculating and cold about her. She looked around my house with the eyes of an appraiser who was trying to figure out how much it might be worth. She smiled politely, but her eyes remained indifferent. I tried. For Lachlan's sake, I really tried. I cooked her favorite dishes, took an interest in her work as a financial analyst, and listened to her stories about her ambitions. At the wedding, I was sitting in the front row with a tight smile, wearing a new dress that I bought especially for this event. Next to me was Audra, Ziona's mother. She was a statuesque woman with hair dyed an unnatural red color and rings on every finger. She was always commenting loudly on everything that was happening and never stopped talking about how much she had done to organize this wonderful wedding. After the wedding, everything changed. Lachlan seemed to drift away. His calls became less and less frequent, his visits shorter and shorter, and always with Ziona. And then Audra began to appear. Lachlan, can you come for the weekend? I asked when he called. I can't, Mom. Ziona and I are going to see Audra. It's her birthday. Or, sorry, Mom, but Audra invited us to dinner. Maybe some other time? Audra, Audra, Audra. She seemed to become the center of their universe. And then the family dinners began. Lachlan, Ziona, and Audra would come to my place and I would cook. I cooked a lot, trying to please them, and they would come empty-handed. No bottle of wine, no dessert, nothing. But after dinner, Ziona would always ask, Eudora, do you mind if I take some food home? Lachlan and I are so busy at work that we don't have time to cook. And I would say yes. Of course I would. He's my son. I wanted him to eat well. But then I started to notice that Ziona was bringing containers with her. Lots of containers. And so did Audra. At first they took the leftovers. Then they took more and more. And then one day Audra said, Eudora, your casserole is really good. Let me take half of it with me. Dexter will love it. Dexter is her cat. She wanted to give half of my casserole that I made for my son to her cat. At work at Galway Construction, I was respected. I was the chief accountant, kept all the financial records in perfect order, knew every figure and every detail. I was valued. They listened to me. But at home, with Ziona and Audra, I felt invisible. They talked to each other as if I did not exist. They discussed their plans, vacations, purchases. Sometimes Audra even criticized my house. "It's about time these curtains were replaced, isn't it, Ziona?" she would say, looking at my curtains that I had made myself. Or, "You have so many unnecessary things, Eudora. You're going to move to a smaller place soon anyway, so why keep it all?" Moving to something smaller? This was my home, the house where I lived most of my life. A home where every single thing reminded me of Thorn. And LeClan? He didn't say anything. He sat next to Ziona, staring at his plate, and he was silent. Sometimes he would give me a guilty look, but he never intervened. Never. My friends began to notice the change. Beatrice, with whom I had been friends since our children were in kindergarten, once said, "Judah, you seem depressed. What's going on?" I told her about Ziona and Audra. Beatrice suggested that we invite them to lunch with us. "Maybe if there is someone else there, they will hold back," she suggested. It was a stupid idea. Ziona and Audra were polite to Beatrice, but they kept taking little jabs at me. "Eudora, you forgot to salt the soup again," Audra said, even though I remembered that salt was the first thing I added. "Why didn't you ever tell us about her?" Ziona asked, sounding as if she were accusing me of some crime. After that lunch, Beatrice said, "Now I understand what you mean. It's just awful." But gradually, even Beatrice stopped coming in. Maybe she was uncomfortable witnessing these little humiliations. Maybe she was just tired of my complaints. Who knows? A year before I retired, I got a back injury. It was nothing serious, I just turned around badly while lifting a heavy folder of documents. But it hurt a lot, and the doctor prescribed bed rest for a few days. I called Lachlan. "Son, I'm not feeling well. Could you come over and help me with the shopping?" "Of course, Mom," he replied. "I'll come tomorrow." But he didn't come alone. With Ziona and Audra. They burst into my house like a hurricane, arranging the groceries they had bought, commenting on the state of my refrigerator, sorting through my medications. "These pills are expired," Audra said, throwing away the pills I had saved in case the pain returned. A mess? In my house? I've always been tidy. Everything had its place. But now I was lying in bed, helpless, listening to them turn my life upside down. The worst part was that Ziona had found the photo album, the one I was holding in my hands. "Oh, look at these old pictures," she exclaimed, flipping through the pages with her chip-oily fingers. "What are you doing?" I almost screamed. "Oh, I just want to take some photos of LeClan to scan. We're making a digital archive," she replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. And again, LeClan didn't say anything. He stood watching his wife tear pages out of the scrapbook of my life and said nothing. They left 2 hours later, leaving behind a mess and an empty refrigerator. They took all the food they had just bought with them, explaining that they were going home anyway, and you don't need that much food. When the door closed behind them, I lay there for a long time looking at the ceiling. Something inside me broke then. Something important. I didn't cry. I just lay there, feeling the emptiness filling me from the inside. I retired without much regret. I loved my job at Galway Construction, but the years were taking their toll. Mr. Galway, the owner of the company, threw me a farewell party. All the employees came, even those with whom I was not very friendly. Even the mayor himself, who had once built his house with the help of our company, brought flowers. "The company won't be the same without you," Mr. Galway said, handing me an engraved watch. Lachlan didn't come to the party. Ziona was organizing an important project, and they couldn't get away. At least that's what he said on the phone. I flipped through the last pages of the album. There are few photos in it. After Thorne's death, I almost stopped taking pictures. And why? For whom? The sun has almost disappeared behind the horizon. Twilight envelops the garden, making the contours blurry and indefinite. Just like my life right now. Lachlan, Ziona, and Audra are coming tomorrow. I invited them to a barbecue. I don't know why I keep doing this. Maybe I still hope that something will change. That my son will remember how much Thorn and I loved him, how we sacrificed everything for him, that he will finally see what his wife and mother-in-law are really like. I bought 15 kilograms of beef. It's too much for 4 people, but I know they will take whatever is left. Maybe even what's not left. I close the album and get up from the chair. My legs are a little numb from sitting for so long. The house is dark and quiet. Sometimes I talk to Thorn as if he were still here, listening to me. But tonight I don't say anything. Tonight I just go to bed, preparing for tomorrow, which, like all the days before it, will bring only disappointment. Maybe tomorrow something will change. Maybe. Breakfast is my favorite part of the day. A quiet morning, a cup of hot tea, toast with homemade jam, and the morning paper. Thorn called it my ritual of peace. Today I perform this ritual automatically, but my thoughts are not about peace at all. Last night I called Lachlan to invite his family to a barbecue, and all morning I've been replaying our conversation in my head. "We'll definitely come, Mom," he said, sounding like he was doing me a huge favor. How things have changed. Lachlan used to drop everything to spend even an hour with me. Now his visits seem like a chore, and it didn't start all at once. In small drops, gradually, Ziona and Audra's poison seeped into our relationship, spoiling it, turning it into something ugly and painful. I remember the first Easter after their wedding. I invited them to a festive dinner. I spent a week preparing. I cleaned the house, ordered flowers, baked 2 pies, apple and cherry, because I didn't know which one Ziona would like best. I made traditional ham with honey glaze, mashed potatoes with garlic, and baked asparagus. I set the table with the best tablecloth, got out the service that Thorn and I had received for our wedding. They were an hour late. No warning, no apologies. They just walked through the door, and Ziona immediately started complaining about the weather, about traffic, about her allergies. "Oh, you cooked ham?" she cringed. "I'm trying to cut down on meat. I'm sorry you didn't ask in advance." I stood there frozen, holding a towel in my hands. "I can make you something else," I offered, trying to save the day. "Oh, no need," Ziona waved her hand. "I'll just eat the side dishes." Audra, who was standing next to me, added, "Ziona is very concerned about her health. She's on a special diet right now." "A diet? Why didn't she tell me about it?" "We talked on the phone just 2 days ago. It didn't get any better at the table." Audra was critically examining each dish before serving herself. "How much butter did you add to the potatoes?" she asked, as if she were interrogating me. 2 tablespoons, I answered, feeling guilty, although I didn't understand why. "That much?" Audra raised her eyebrows. "It's so bad for your heart, especially at your age, at my age." She was only 7 years younger than I was, but she talked like I was on the verge of death. "And Lachlan?" He ate in silence, as if not noticing this little humiliation. From time to time, he gave me guilty looks, but he didn't say a word in my defense. After lunch, when I served tea and cakes, Ziona suddenly said, "You don't mind if we take some food home, do you? We have a very busy schedule next week and won't have time to cook." Without waiting for my answer, she took out plastic containers from her bag. Not one or two, but a whole stack. She came prepared. She came knowing that she would take most of the food I had prepared. "Of course," I said, because what else could I say? Ziona and Audra started filling the containers, leaving almost nothing behind. Even the pies they had barely touched were in the containers. "I just love your baking," Audra said as she closed the lid on a container with an almost whole apple pie. "Dexter loves it too. There's that damn cat again." I pressed my lips together to keep from saying something I would regret. They left, loaded down with my food, not even offering to help me clean up. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, among the dirty dishes, feeling used and humiliated. It was not the last time this happened. They turned it into a tradition. Every visit ended with them taking the food. Sometimes they didn't even hide their intentions. "Mom, you're going to make that casserole Ziona loves so much?" Lachlan would ask on the phone before the visit. "Ziona says there's a lunch at the office next week and she wants to bring something homemade." Yes, they used my food so that Ziona could impress her colleagues, to pass off my food as her own. And I allowed it. For Lachlan's sake, for the sake of peace in the family, I continued to cook, continued to give back. But food was only part of the problem. They criticized everything. My house, my clothes, my habits. One day Audra came in with a new expensive coat. She spun around in front of me, obviously expecting compliments. "It's a very nice coat," I said sincerely. "It looks good on you." "Thank you," she replied with a smile. And then she added, "But your coat, Eudora, is completely out of fashion. No one wears those wide lapels anymore." My coat was not new, it is true, but it was warm, comfortable, and most importantly, Thorne loved it. He said I looked like a movie star in it. "I like it," I replied, trying not to show how much her words hurt me. "Oh, of course," Audra shrugged. "At your age, it doesn't matter what you look like anymore. There's that age thing again. As if I were some old wreck, not a woman who still worked full-time, gardened, and could beat her at a brisk walk despite her expensive fitness shoes." Ziona was no better. "These curtains are too heavy for such a small room," she said one day as she looked around my living room. "And this carpet doesn't go with the furniture at all. You should hire a designer. Or, why do you have so many knickknacks? They only collect dust. Minimalism is in trend now. Trinkets." That's what she called the collection of porcelain figurines that Thorne and I had been collecting for years. Each figurine had its own story, its own value for us. But for Ziona, they were just things that were collecting dust. And one day, Ziona crossed the line. We were sitting in my living room in the afternoon. I was showing them photos from a trip to the lake that my friends and I had taken last month. "It's so nice to see you're still active," Ziona said, sounding as if I were 85, not 65. "Yes, we had a great time," I replied, ignoring her remarks. "But you should be more careful," Audra interjected. "At your age, a fall could be fatal." "We were just walking around the lake, not rock climbing," I tried to joke. "Weren't you, Lachlan?" My son, my only son, shrugged his shoulders and mumbled something vague. He didn't deny it, but he didn't support it either. He simply remained silent. "Speaking of age," Ziona suddenly said, and her eyes had that cold glint in them that I had learned to recognize and fear. I felt the blood drain from my face. A nursing home? I was still working full-time, had friends, hobbies. I was completely independent. "Why?" I could only ask. "Well, this house is too big for one person, and the garden needs care. And there will be round-the-clock medical care." Ziona spoke as if she were offering me a vacation at a resort, not life among strangers. "And real estate here is getting more expensive," Audra added, and this opened my eyes to the real reason for their concern. My house. They wanted my house. "I have no plans to move," I said firmly. "This is my home. It will be mine as long as I live." Ziona and Audra exchanged glances, and then Ziona smiled that fake smile of hers. "We're just worried about you." The night they left, I cried for a long time, not because of their words, but because of Lachlan's silence. He sat there, listening to his wife suggest that I should go to a nursing home, and didn't say a word of protest. The next day, I called Beatrice and told her everything. "Eudora, this is terrible," she said. "You have to talk to Lachlan alone. He needs to know how you feel." I tried. I called him at work and asked him to lunch. "I don't think that's a good idea, Mom," he said. "Ziona will have questions." "I just want to talk to you, son, in private," I insisted. He agreed reluctantly, but he came anyway. He was sitting in the kitchen where he used to eat my pancakes as a boy, looking so strange, so far away. "Lachlan," I began, sitting down across from him, "I want to talk to you about the conversation we had yesterday." "What conversation?" he asked, although he knew exactly what I was talking about. "About Ziona's proposal for a nursing home," I reminded him. "Do you really think I belong there?" "Well, not now, of course," he replied, not looking me in the eye. "You're not getting any younger, Mom. No one is getting any younger," I wanted to shout. "Not me, not you, not your precious Ziona." "I'm not old enough to be written off," I said instead. "And I don't understand why Ziona and Audra are always putting me down, and you don't say anything." Lachlan flared up. "They're not belittling you. They're worried about my house," I said. "About how much it's worth." "You see?" Lachlan exclaimed. "You're always prejudiced against them. You always think the worst of them." What else am I supposed to think when they take all the food I cook? When they criticize my house, my clothes, my way of life. I felt tears coming to my eyes, but I held them back. When was the last time you defended me, Lachlan? When was the last time you took my side? He turned away, avoiding my gaze. You're overreacting, Mom. Zion and Audra are just like that. They don't mean to offend. It's their way of communicating. Communicating? I couldn't believe my ears. That my things are useless junk? That my house is too big for me? That's not socializing, LeClan. If you don't like them so much, why do you keep inviting us over? He asked suddenly. It was a blow from below the belt. Because you are my son, I answered quietly. My only son. Because I love you and I want to see you. Even if it means putting up with Zion and Audra. Lachlan sighed and rubbed his face with his hands. Look, Mom, I know they can be harsh sometimes, but they don't mean it. And I can't be in the middle of two fires all the time. Ziona is my wife. We live together. We build a life together. I can't keep arguing with her because of you, because of me. As if I were the problem. As if I was the one who created the conflict, not Ziona and Audra with their greed and disrespect. I'm not asking you to argue with her, I said. I'm asking you to defend your mother when she's being insulted. Is that too much to ask? He looked at me as if I was asking him for something impossible. Then he mumbled, I'll try to talk to her. But I knew he wouldn't. He wouldn't dare. Ziona kept him on a short leash, and he didn't even try to break free. After that conversation, things only got worse. Ziona and Audra seemed to realize that I had complained to Lachlan and decided to punish me. Now they didn't even try to hide their disrespect. One Thanksgiving, Audra brought her specialty turkey, insisting that her recipe was much better than mine. The turkey was dry and oversalted, but Ziona and Lachlan ate it, praising it as if it were the food of the gods. And when I brought my traditional pumpkin pie, Ziona just grimaced. Oh, this pie again. Didn't we eat it last year? As if tradition is a bad thing. As if the very fact that I baked this pie every year made it less delicious. Another time, when we had lunch at a restaurant on the occasion of LeClan's birthday, Ziona insisted that I pay for everyone, even though she had chosen this expensive place. And when the bill came, Audra smiled sweetly and said, Oh, Eudora, don't you drink too much? This is my second glass of wine. It was my first and only glass, but Lachlan just shrugged his shoulders when I tried to object. The last straw was my illness last winter. It was just a cold, nothing serious, but I felt really bad. Fever, cough, weakness. I called Lachlan just to tell him that I wouldn't be able to make it to the Sunday lunch we had planned. Oh, that's too bad, he said without much sympathy. And then he added, So lunch is canceled? Not, how are you feeling? Not, do you need anything? But just a question about lunch. Yes, LeClan, lunch is canceled, I answered tiredly. I'm not in a state to cook. What if we come to your place? He suddenly suggested. She makes a great chicken soup. I almost agreed because the thought of someone taking care of me was nice. But then I remembered all the previous cases and asked, Can you bring all the food with you? I hadn't left the house for a few days and I have almost nothing in the fridge. The pause on the other end was very telling. Well, I don't know, LeClan said. Ziona's really busy at work right now. She hasn't had time to go to the store. I see, I interrupted him. Then maybe it's best to just rest. I've already taken my medication. I'll feel better soon. Well, if you're sure, I heard relief in his voice. He was glad he didn't have to come to his sick mother. After that call, I lay in bed, looking at the ceiling, and thought about how everything had changed. Lachlan, who used to be the most caring boy, didn't even ask me if I had any medicine or needed any help. I recovered on my own. I always do. Beatrice brought me the supermarket. My neighbor Martha stopped by to check on me, and even Mr. Galway, my former boss, sent flowers when he heard I was sick. But not my son, not LeClan. And now, as I finish my tea, I'm thinking about what has to happen tomorrow. I bought 15 kilograms of beef for a barbecue to which I invited Lachlan, Ziona, and Audra. It's a lot for 4 people, but I know they will take whatever is left. They always do. Why do I keep doing this? Why do I keep inviting them over, cooking for them, putting up with their disrespect? Maybe this is the last time. Maybe this barbecue will be the last attempt to change something. The last chance for Lachlan to see what his wife and mother-in-law are really like. The last chance for me to reconnect with my son. And if it doesn't work, if this time they come empty-handed and leave with full containers, if they humiliate me again and Lachlan doesn't say anything again. Today is barbecue day. I woke up before dawn, even though the guests aren't due to arrive until 3 o'clock. Sleep brought little rest. All night long I was haunted by disturbing thoughts. But now, as the first rays of sunlight illuminate my garden, I feel strangely determined. Everything has to be perfect today. Either everything will change or I don't let myself think the thought through. Instead, I focus on my to-do list. I have a lot of work to do. I started with a thorough cleaning of the house and yard. Even though we plan to spend time outside, I know that Ziona will certainly find an excuse to go through the rooms to help me with something, or just to criticize the state of my house. So everything has to shine. Yesterday I bought 15 kilograms of beef. The shop assistant in the meat department of the supermarket looked at me in surprise. "Are you planning a big party?" he asked, wrapping the steaks. "A family barbecue," I answered with a tight smile. 15 kilograms for a family barbecue? He raised his eyebrows. "How many relatives do you have?" "4," I said, and seeing his confused look, I added, "Some people like to take their food home." The vendor nodded, but in his eyes I saw the same question I had often asked myself. Why do I allow this? Now marinating the meat in different sauces, I think about it again. Why do I continue to tolerate their disrespect? Why do I continue to cook for people who see me as a free cook? There is no answer. Or maybe I just don't want to recognize it. I have prepared 5 different steak marinades: classic with rosemary and garlic, spicy with chili peppers, sweet with honey and soy sauce, citrus with lemon and orange, and oriental with ginger and soy sauce. It's a lot, I know. No one can try all of them at once, but I want there to be a choice. I want even Ziona and Audra to find something to complain about this time. In addition to the steaks, I prepared vegetables for the grill: zucchini, eggplant, colorful peppers, all cut into identical slices, drizzled with olive oil and sprinkled with herbs from my garden. I baked 3 huge potatoes in gold foil with butter and rosemary. I made 3 types of salad: green with avocado and tomatoes, potato with homemade mayonnaise, my grandmother's recipe, and fruit with seasonal berries and mint. For dessert, there's chocolate cake, which Lachlan loved as a child, and lemon pie, which has always been Thorne's favorite dessert. I don't know why I decided to bake it today. Maybe I just wanted to feel Thorne's presence, to feel his support. When the cooking was done, I started decorating the yard. I took out the garlands of small light bulbs that Thorne and I always hung at Christmas and hung them on the trees around the patio. I put fresh flowers from my garden on the table. I put new cushions on the garden chairs. I know I've overdone it. I know that all this food, all these decorations are just a way to appease Zion and Audra, a way to buy their love or at least their respect. But I can't stop. At 2 in the afternoon, everything was ready. The table is set, the food is cooked, the grill is heated. I took a shower, put on a new blue dress that I bought especially for this event, and even put on some light makeup. I wanted to look good. I wanted Lachlan to see that his mother still takes care of herself, that she is not the old, frail woman that Ziona and Audra portray her to be. At 3 o'clock and 15 minutes, they still hadn't arrived. I started to get nervous. The weather was beautiful, warm and sunny, perfect for a barbecue. Had they decided not to come? But no, Lachlan had promised. He would have warned me if their plans changed. At 3:30, I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. They arrived late, as usual, without any apologies. I went out on the porch with a smile, trying to hide my irritation. "Hi, Mom." Lachlan kissed me on the cheek. He was holding a bag with a bottle of wine, the cheap kind I never buy. It was the first time they brought anything at all. Ziona hugged me formally, barely touching me. She smelled of expensive perfume, too strong for daytime. She was wearing white linen pants and a blouse that I'm sure cost more than my monthly pension. "Judora, you look beautiful," she said with that fake smile I knew so well. "Yes," I answered, trying to sound casual. "I bought it especially for today." "It's a nice color," she nodded, but I could see an appraising look in her eyes. And there it was, the first injection. Before she even crossed the threshold, she had already managed to humiliate me. Audra was the last to enter, carrying a huge bag. I thought that maybe she brought some contribution to our barbecue, but I quickly realized that the bag was filled with plastic containers. They didn't even try to hide their intentions. Eudora, Audra kissed the air near my cheek. You've aged so much in the last month. Are you feeling all right? I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I didn't want to ruin the day. I feel great, thank you, I replied, stepping aside to let them into the house. Everything is ready. They walked through the house, and I heard Audra whispering to Ziona. This carpet is completely worn out, and these curtains? They must be older than me. I'm pretending not to hear. Today I won't let them throw me off balance. Today everything will be different. When we walked out into the backyard, I was pleased to see Lachlan's eyes widen in surprise. Wow, Mom, he said sincerely. You really went to a lot of trouble. Thank you, son, I replied, feeling warmed by his compliment. I wanted today to be special. Ziona looked at the table with all the food and raised her eyebrows. Is this all for us? She asked skeptically. There's enough food for a regiment. I just wanted to give you a choice, I explained, pointing to the different steak marinades. How much meat did you buy? Audra asked, looking at the plates of steaks. 15 kilograms, I answered. 15 kilograms? Audra and Ziona exchanged quick glances. I thought you might want to take some home, I said, looking directly at them. Ziona blushed slightly, but quickly composed herself. That's very kind of you, Eudora. We sat down at the table. Lachlan began to grill the steaks, as his father always did. It was a rare moment when he looked truly happy and relaxed. Standing by the grill with a bottle of beer, turning the meat, he reminded me of Thorn. I felt something tighten in my chest at the memory. Ziona and Audra were sitting at the table, sipping the wine that Lachlan had brought. They spoke quietly to each other, occasionally glancing in my direction and giggling. I pretended not to notice, concentrating on serving the salads. When the first steaks were ready, we started eating. Lachlan enthusiastically praised the food, especially the potato salad. Mom, it's just like when I was a kid, he said, putting on a side of his own. No one makes potato salad better than you. Ziona rolled her eyes. It's just potatoes and mayonnaise, she said. It's nothing special. It's my grandmother's recipe, I said calmly. It has a secret ingredient. Probably extra cholesterol, Audra muttered, but loud enough for me to hear. I ignored the comment and continued eating. The meat was perfect, juicy on the inside, crispy on the outside. The grilled vegetables added freshness and color. Even the salads, which Ziona usually ignored, looked tempting today. But of course, they couldn't just enjoy the food. Eudora, do you know that red meat is very unhealthy? Began Audra, swallowing another piece of steak. Especially at your age. Yes, I've heard of it, I replied neutrally. And all those sauces, she continued, pointing to the marinades. So much sugar and salt. Then maybe you shouldn't eat it, I suggested with an innocent expression. Audra raised her eyebrows in surprise, but remained silent and continued eating. Lachlan, do you remember when your mom tried to teach you how to ride a bike? She began with an innocent smile. Tell Audra that story. I tensed up. This story was painful for me. Lachlan had fallen off his bike and broken his arm when I was teaching him to ride. I felt guilty for years, even though Thorne always said it was an accident that could have happened to anyone. Lachlan hesitated, but under Ziona's insistent gaze, he began to tell. Well, I was about 6 years old. My mom decided to teach me how to ride a two-wheeler. She held the bike and then let go, thinking that I already had my balance. But I fell and broke my arm. Oh my God, Audra gasped theatrically. How irresponsible. It was an accident, I interjected. He was stronger. He could have held the bike better. Thorne was at work, I replied, feeling anger rising inside me. This was a subtle hint that Ziona often took time off whenever she wanted, having parents who supported her and Lachlan financially. What do you mean? Ziona narrowed her eyes. Nothing. I quickly backed away, not wanting to stir up conflict. It's just that Thorne worked hard to provide for us. Unlike some people, Audra muttered, looking at me. I felt my cheeks flush. I worked my whole life, getting up early, coming home late, saving every cent so that Lachlan could get an education. I worked for 40 years as an accountant, I said quietly but firmly, and I was respected at work. Of course. Audra waved it off as if it didn't matter. As usual, Lachlan remained silent, staring at his plate. He chewed the meat with exaggerated attention, as if it were the most interesting steak in the world. Lunch continued in the same spirit. Ziona and Audra exchanged meaningful glances, whispered, and occasionally threw in some venomous comments. I tried to stay calm, reminding myself that today was a special day. A day when everything would change. When it was time for dessert, I brought chocolate cake and lemon pie. It's my favorite, he said with childlike enthusiasm. I know, I smiled. I remember all your preferences, son. Lachlan, you know that sugar is poison. We agreed to cut back on the sweets. One slice won't hurt, Lachlan argued, and it was so unusual that we were all silent for a moment in surprise. Well, it's for your health, Ziona shrugged, pushing the dessert plate away defiantly. But Audra was not so delicate. She took a large piece of lemon pie and grimaced as she tasted it. It's too sour, she said. You must have overdone it with the lemon. It was Thorne's favorite dessert, I said, feeling my throat tighten. Well, to taste and color, as they say. Audra shrugged and continued eating, although, judging by her expression, she didn't like the pie. After dessert, when the sun began to set, I suggested coffee. Lachlan accepted. Ziona declined, saying something about caffeine being bad for her sleep, and Audra asked for tea. When I went to the kitchen to prepare the drinks, I heard Ziona say to Audra, "We should take more meat home. I'm not going to cook all weekend." "And a cake for Dexter," Audra added. "He loves chocolate." I froze, holding the kettle. Not that damn cat again. They wanted to give the chocolate cake I'd baked especially for Lachlan to the cat. I felt something inside me break completely. When I came back with coffee and tea, Lachlan was already putting the meat into the containers that Ziona had gotten. Not the leftovers, not a few pieces, but almost all the meat. And not just meat. They were packing vegetables, salads, even desserts. "What are you doing?" I asked, even though the answer was obvious. "Oh, we're just taking some food home," Ziona replied with the same fake smile. "You said yourself you thought about it when you bought all that meat." "A little?" I couldn't believe my eyes. "You're packing almost everything." "Well, you don't need that much food," Audra interjected. "And we have a busy schedule next week. Ziona has an important presentation, and I'm not worried about your schedule," I interrupted, feeling my voice tremble. "This is my food. I bought it and cooked it. I didn't make it for you to take home and feed it to your cat." Silence fell. Lachlan stood there holding the container of steaks in his hands. Ziona and Audra exchanged surprised glances, as if they couldn't believe I dared to contradict them. "Well, I'm sorry," Ziona feigned offense. "We thought we were helping." "You're not helping." I felt the anger that had been building up for years finally bursting out. "You never help. You come empty-handed and leave with bags full. You criticize my house, my clothes, my food. You tell humiliating stories about me. And you," I turned to Lachlan, "you never stand up for me. You never tell them to stop." "Mom, you're exaggerating," Lachlan began, but I held up my hand to stop him. "I've put up with this for years. I have endured their disrespect, their greed, their cruelty. And your silence, Lachlan, your betrayal." "Betrayal?" He was outraged. "I never betrayed you?" "You betrayed me every time you kept quiet," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "Every time you let them humiliate me. Every time you took their side instead of mine." Lachlan blushed. He put the container on the table and tried to take my hand, but I stepped back. "Mom, let's talk calmly." "I've been calm for years," I interrupted him. "But I've had enough." Ziona and Audra looked at me with a mixture of surprise and anger. "If you're treating us so badly," Ziona began with feigned sadness, "maybe we should leave." "Yes," I said firmly. "You should leave." "Mom, don't." Lachlan tried to calm the situation. "Get out," I said, looking at all three of them. "Forever. Out." 3 words that changed everything. 3 words after which there was no turning back. After those 3 words, silence fell. A deep, heavy silence in which you could hear the leaves falling from the trees in my garden. Lachlan looked at me with wide eyes, as if he were seeing me for the first time. Ziona pressed her lips into a thin line. Audra opened her mouth to say something but then closed it, apparently at a loss for words. "You're not serious," Lachlan finally said, his voice trembling with tension. "I am," I replied, my own calm surprising me. "I'm tired of the constant humiliation and disrespect. I'm tired of my only son standing by and letting his wife and mother-in-law abuse me." "We never abused you." Ziona tried to sound hurt, but I could see the calculation in her cold eyes. "Help?" I shook my head. "By taking my food? By criticizing my home? Telling degrading stories about me? That's not helping, Ziona. It's abuse." "Mom, be reasonable." Lachlan took a step toward me. "You're just tired. We can talk about this later when you've calmed down." "I am absolutely calm," I said. "I want you to leave. All 3 of you." "You can't kick your own son out," Audra interjected, finally finding the words. "That's ridiculous." "I'm not kicking him out," I explained, looking directly at Lachlan. "I'm giving him a choice. Either he starts respecting me and protecting me from you two, or he leaves with you and doesn't come back." Lachlan looked from me to Ziona and back again, as if torn between 2 parts of his life. I could see the struggle in his eyes, but I could also see that he had already made his choice. A long time ago. "Mom, you don't understand," he began. "Ziona is my wife. We are a family." "And who do you think I am?" I asked quietly. He did not answer. "I think we should leave," Ziona said, taking Lachlan's hand. "When you calm down, Eudora, maybe we can talk about it." "I won't change my mind," I replied firmly. They packed their things in silence. Ziona and Audra left the food containers on the table. For the first time in years, they left empty-handed. Lachlan looked at me one last time, a long, sad look in which I read not only disappointment, but also accusation, as if it was my fault that our relationship was ruined. When the door closed behind them, I sank into a chair, feeling my knees trembling. What had I done? I had driven my own son away, my only family. Now I was really alone. The first weeks after that barbecue scene were the hardest. I was waiting for a call from Lachlan. I was waiting for him to come, to apologize, to say that he understood me. But the phone was silent. The door did not open. I tried to keep myself busy so that I wouldn't think about it. I cleaned the house, worked in the garden, watched old movies. But in the evenings, the loneliness came with renewed vigor. I sat in Thorne's chair, looking at my phone, which was stubbornly silent. On the 3rd week, I couldn't stand it any longer and called Lachlan myself. He didn't pick up the phone. I left a message and asked him to call me back. There was no response. A month after that fateful dinner, I received a message from Lachlan. Not a call, not a visit, but a short text message. "Mom, I hope you have calmed down by now. What happened was terrible. You hurt my wife and her mother for no reason. When you are ready to apologize, let me know." I read this message again and again, not believing my eyes. Did he expect me to apologize? After all the years of humiliation, after all their greed and disrespect? I did not answer. I could not. I was so overwhelmed with anger and pain that I was afraid that if I started writing, I would say something I would regret. Weeks passed, and then months. I stopped waiting for the phone to ring. I stopped looking at the door in the hope that Lachlan would show up. I began to accept my new reality. I was alone, and maybe that's not so bad. Gradually, I began to notice that I felt lighter, without the constant stress of Ziona and Audra's visits, without having to prepare the huge lunches they took with them, without the constant expectation of another humiliation. One morning I woke up and realized that my house belongs to me alone. I can do whatever I want in it. I can rearrange the furniture, repaint the walls, throw away old things that I don't like, but which I kept for fear of Ziona's criticism. I started with small changes. I bought new cushions for the couch, bright red ones that Ziona would undoubtedly call too bright for my age. I hung new curtains in the living room light, airy ones that let in more sunlight. I even repainted the kitchen the mint color I had always loved, but which Thorne had never agreed to. One day I got a call from Beatrice, an old friend of mine with whom I had almost stopped talking because of Ziona and Audra. "Judah, how are you?" she asked. I told her everything about the barbecue, about the 15 kilograms of beef, about the 3 words that changed my life. "Oh my God," Beatrice exhaled when I finished. "You really did it? Finally?" "Yes," I answered, feeling my lips stretch into a smile. "And you know what? I don't regret it." "And you shouldn't," Beatrice assured me. "They treated you terribly for years. I'm so glad you finally stood up for yourself." We met her the next day for lunch. For the first time in a long time, I was sitting in a cafe with a friend, laughing, talking about everything without worrying about someone judging my every word. "You know," Beatrice said as we finished our coffee, "the local college starts a gardening course next month. We could enroll together. Before, I would have said no. I would have said that I didn't have time, that I had to be available for LeClan if he wanted to come. But now—" "That sounds great," I said. "Let's sign me up." The gardening course turned out to be one of the best decisions of my life. I met a lot of interesting people there, men and women my age who were also looking for new hobbies and new friends. We learned how to grow exotic flowers, create harmonious arrangements, and take care of plants. 2 months later, my garden was transformed. Now it grew not only traditional roses and hydrangeas, but also exotic orchids, Japanese maples, and colored succulents. Every corner of the garden told its own story. And it was my story, not Thorne's, not LeClan's, not Ziona's. It was mine. During the course, I met Margaret, a widow my age who had the same passion for gardening. We started visiting each other regularly, exchanging plants, visiting botanical gardens together. "My children live on the other side of the country," Margaret told me once. "At first I missed them, but then I realized that it frees me. I can live for myself, do what I want, without having to adapt to anyone's expectations." Her words resonated with me. I started to feel this freedom too. Freedom from the need to be a good mother, a good mother-in-law, a dutiful grandmother. If LeClan and Ziona ever have children, I could just be Eudora. And it was wonderful. I started traveling. First, small trips with Margaret and Beatrice to neighboring towns, to the ocean. Then I went further, to the Grand Canyon, to New York, even to Canada. I took photos not for an album that someone would look through someday, but for myself. I wrote down my impressions in my diary, not being afraid that someone would read it and make fun of my thoughts. Once, when I returned from a trip to Chicago, I found a box on my doorstep. No inscription, no note, just a small cardboard box. I opened it carefully and froze. Inside were the photos of LeClan that Ziona had once taken from my album. They were neatly folded, but without any explanation. I didn't know what to think. Was it an apology? A gesture of reconciliation? Or was Ziona just getting rid of unnecessary junk? I put the box back on the shelf and decided to think about it later. But time passed, and I didn't open it. Eventually, I realized that these photos were the past, and I wanted to live in the present. A year passed after that fateful barbecue. I was sitting in my renovated garden with a book, enjoying a warm spring day, when I heard the doorbell ring. When I opened it, I froze in surprise. The postman was standing on the doorstep with a large envelope. "Registered mail for Eudora Hollister," he said, handing me the envelope and a tablet to sign. I signed and, closing the door, carefully examined the envelope. The sender's address was unfamiliar to me, but the handwriting— I knew the handwriting. Lachlan's. My heart pounded. A year without any news, and suddenly a letter. What could be inside? An apology? Accusations? Some official documents? I sat down in my chair, holding the envelope in my lap, not daring to open it. What if it was another demand to apologize to Ziona and Audra? What if Lachlan still blamed me for the broken relationship? I looked around me. At my renovated house, which now reflected me, not the past. At my beautiful garden, which had become my pride. At the travel photos that adorned the walls. To the new friends I was going to meet in the evening to play bridge. This was my new life. A life without toxicity, without constant stress, without having to justify myself for just being me. A life in which I found inner peace and joy. Did I want to risk that for words on paper? I walked over to the trash can and resolutely threw the envelope inside. Unread. unopened. The past should stay in the past. That evening, sitting with my friends at a bridge game, I felt strangely relieved. It was as if I had lifted the last weight that was holding me back. I was finally free. Free from expectations, from accusations, from toxic relationships. Eudora, it's your turn, Margaret reminded me, snapping me out of my thoughts. I smiled and looked at my cards. Good hand. A very good hand. I was going to play it my way, without looking back at the past or worrying about the future. Just enjoying the moment. I declare a grand slam, I said, feeling a smile stretch across my face. A new life. My life. And it was beautiful.